All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down Dr. Kem's complete cinematic lecture on ion-selective electrodes, or as they're usually called, ISEs. We're going to explore the incredibly fascinating, microscopic world of these sensors, and we're scaling all the way from the nitty-gritty molecular physics and chemical equations right up to the massive, global applications that actually rely on this tech every single day. If you've ever wondered how we manage to decode the invisible chemical makeup of our blood, our drinking water, or even the soil beneath our feet, well, you're in exactly the right place. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the power of potentiometry. Then we'll hit the anatomy of an ISE, the magic of membranes, the types of ISE sensors, selectivity and interferences, and wrap it all up with real-world applications.
Okay, part one, the power of potentiometry.
Picture this. You're trying to analyze a highly complex environment. Think agricultural soil, human sweat, industrial wastewater. How do you find one specific ion hidden in a sea of billions? Because, let's face it, real-world samples aren't clean. They are totally chaotic. You aren't just looking for one thing. You're looking for one thing while literally thousands of other similar things are actively getting in your way. It is the ultimate chemical needle in a haystack problem.
Look at the contrast here. You've got the absolute dream scenario, a beautifully isolated target ion. But then you look at reality. A chaotic, complex soup of interfering ions just floating around, bumping into each other, and, generally causing a nuisance. That crowded, messy solution is exactly the technological hurdle that ion-selective electrodes were designed to overcome.
Moving right along, section 2, anatomy of an ISE.
So, how do we actually build a potentiometric cell? Well, you need two crucial pieces immersed in your sample solution. First up, an indicator electrode, which has this very special, highly selective membrane right at its tip. And second, a reference electrode. You absolutely need both of these half cells to complete the electrical circuit and actually make a measurement. The whole trick is how these two components interact. The reference electrode, that's your anchor. It provides a constant, highly stable baseline potential, and honestly, it couldn't care less what's in the sample. The indicator electrode, on the other hand, is super reactive to the target ion, which creates a variable potential. By hooking both of them up to a high-impedance voltmeter, we can just measure the voltage difference between that steady baseline and the reacting indicator. All right, section 3, the magic of membranes. It all really boils down to these molecules called ionophores. Think of that selective membrane at the tip of the electrode as an exclusive VIP club. The ionophore? It acts as the highly selective bouncer standing at the door. It's a neutral, ring-shaped molecule, dissolved right into the membrane itself, and its one and only job is to let one specific chemical guest inside while literally turning everyone else away. Cape valinomycin, for example, it's actually an antibiotic, but it acts as this incredible ionophore. Notice that ring shape? Its electron-rich center forms a cavity that happens to be the exact mathematical diameter needed to extract a potassium ion. It hugs the potassium perfectly while flat-out rejecting other ions simply because they're the wrong size. It's brilliant. So when our molecular bouncer traps these target ions at the interface, right between the sample solution and the membrane, something almost magical happens. It creates a microscopic separation of electrical charge across that boundary. And because ions carry a charge, pulling them to the membrane builds up an electrical potential, a voltage that we can actually pick up with our equipment. But you might be wondering, what does that voltage actually mean? To translate that tiny electrical charge into a highly accurate, usable concentration reading, we have to rely on a foundational law of electrochemistry, the Nernst equation. Now, we aren't going to get bogged down in the heavy algebra here. This equation beautifully simplifies the math to show one absolute core relationship. The voltage of our cell changes logarithmically as the concentration, or actually, more accurately, the activity of our target ion changes. Once you calibrate your electrode, the Nernst equation is what allows your meter to instantly convert a raw millivolt reading into a precise chemical concentration.
Which brings us to section 4, types of ISE sensors.
There's basically a quick mental checklist of the three main membrane categories. First, glass membranes, like your ubiquitous pH electrode made of silicate glass. Second, solid-state membranes. These use highly insoluble crystals, like using a lanthanum fluoride crystal to detect fluoride. And finally, polymer membranes. These rely on flexible plastics like PVC mixed with liquid plasticizers, and of course, those incredible ionophores we were just talking about. And as engineering evolved, scientists naturally figured out how to miniaturize this whole concept. Enter the ISFET, or Ion-Sensitive Field Effect Transistor.
Invented back in 1970, it perfectly bridged traditional electrochemistry with semiconductor tech by swapping out the metal gate of a standard transistor for an ion-sensitive membrane. And just like that, the very first biosensor FETs were born.
All right, Section 5, Selectivity and Interferences.
Because look, the real world is messy. No membrane is 100% foolproof against chemical intruders. In complex fluids, you're going to encounter imposter ions. For instance, if you're using a printed wearable sensor to measure ammonium in human sweat, you've got a problem. Sweat is packed with sodium and potassium, and since they share a similar size and the exact same electrical charge as ammonium, they can sometimes slip past our molecular bouncers with fake IDs, giving us distracting, false voltage readings.
So how do chemists deal with this? Well, they use a modified formula called the Nikolsky-Eisenman equation, which introduces a selectivity coefficient. This is basically just a numerical measure of how well a membrane discriminates against an interfering ion. The goal is to get a value way lower than 1.0. If the coefficient is, say, 0.01, that proves our electrode is 100 times more responsive to our target than to the background noise. It means it's successfully ignoring the imposters.
And finally, Section 6, Real-World Applications.
These sensors are literally everywhere, working at a massive scale. In agriculture, they're plunging into soils to ensure optimal nitrate levels for crops. In power generation and nuclear fuel reprocessing, they're constantly monitoring critical chloride and fluoride levels. And in our municipal water facilities, they're checking calcium, sodium, and overall drinking water safety day in and day out. They are for sure the silent chemical sentinels of our modern world. But get this, the most profound impact is probably in medicine. This staggering statistic really cements the life-saving capability of that valinomycin polymer membrane we looked at earlier. In the US alone, nearly 200 million measurements are made annually of blood potassium levels using this exact electrode. Without this technology, modern emergency and routine medical diagnostics would basically grind to a halt. It's that crucial. Which leaves us with a pretty incredible thought to ponder. If we can already design molecular bouncers that perfectly isolate potassium in human blood, or fluoride in nuclear runoff, what invisible elements are we going to unlock next? As we push the very boundaries of material science and discover brand new ionophores, we might completely revolutionize how we decode the invisible chemical world around us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll catch you in the next one.